Hey guys, I am talking to you from the garage because it is really polleny outside, and this is how we do it in this COVID influence era. What I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about today is argumentation and about how you might want to structure your paper for this persuasive argument and some different ways to organize your writing and your ideas. Hopefully you've read through the bit of information I have, and you'll watch the other video that I posted from this TV show called The Newsroom. You probably haven't seen it. Most of you probably were too young when it first came out. Pretty good show, but really these first 4 or 5 minutes of it are what I want you to see. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good display of the organization of an argument. So just try to see how he presents information, and then makes his thesis, presents his thesis, provides evidence is probably really important, but also kind of makes the way that he presents the information palatable to people who aren't in. You'll see if you haven't seen it already. You'll see that he comes in pretty hard, right? It's pretty aggressive, and then he kind of flips, and you'll see that there's a tonal change in the way that he presents that information, which is good, and a good rhetorical strategy. Anyway, check that out. It's pretty good. It's one of my favorite argumentations. All right, so we talk about the elements of an argument. One of the things we want to think about is, where is this argument even coming from? Where is this debate being had? Where is the persuasion being done? Is this personal communication? Because if that's the case, then there's a way that you're going to talk to somebody that you know, or that you can see in front of you, because then you have that face-to-face communication, which is of course the most important and influential way to communicate. But what we're going to be doing is writing, so it's going to be a little closer to like maybe a newspaper op-ed, or a position that's being taken in some kind of a print format. Political advertisements generally fall into that category. Is it something from like some kind of an advocacy group that you're maybe you're a part of? You want to one that I'm partial to is the Equal Rights Amendment. I don't understand why the Equal Rights Amendment has been passed, and so I try to make some arguments on behalf of it as often as I can. So you have to understand where that argument or where the discussion is being had, and how it's being had, and who's your potential audiences. You need to think about your claim too, right? So it's easiest when you're making your claim to present a very explicit thesis. And for a paper like this, that's kind of what I want to see that you do. I want you to almost be a little too ham-fisted about it. Just say, this is my position that I'm going to take. There's no reason not to, because once you have that down, once you understand what your thesis is, that is going to really kind of provide that ground, that through line through all of your argument. One thing you want to think too is, do you even have a position that's arguable? Because a lot of times people will want to argue about something because there's something that they hold dear, something that is very emotional to them, but it may not be even something that can be argued because it's so hyper specific, right? To have an argument, to what we're trying to do is to get other people to behave, not just think the way that you're thinking, or consider things the way that you're considering them, but you actually want people to do something, right? That's kind of the whole reason that you're making an argument. So if it's something that can't even be argued, like, I think that we should have a star base on Mars. Well, okay, great, but that probably isn't something that's realistic or feasible. So make sure that the claim that you're making is even something that can be acted upon by those who are within your audience. Otherwise, you're wasting their time, and you're wasting your own as well. And then this is something that I've probably told a lot of you in comments back to you on earlier papers or earlier work, is make sure that you're not using absolute information, right? So all people believe this way. All cars, drive on the right side of the road, or everything, or as soon as you make an absolute statement that every single thing in the known universe operates in one way, It takes about a quarter of a second for somebody to poke a hole in that. So what we want to use are these qualifying words, right? So like some or maybe or in most cases. We want to use those kinds of qualifying information because you may have a very valid point, but you're going to get some snarky arguer who's going to kind of snap back at you and give you, a quick and snarky response to you. Well, this person over here isn't the one who, So what we want to do is to avoid those kinds of opening yourself up to those kinds of rebuttals and those attacks, because they're not fun and they're always going to come. If you've been online for more than 5 minutes in your life, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, so it's okay. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about next. Let's talk a little bit about stasis theory. So this is kind of this old Roman way of thinking about presenting arguments, and this is going to be very kind of common sense to you, right? This is the way we make an argument. Is I'm going to tell you, I'm going to make my point, I'm going to define the issue as best I can. I'm going to say why it matters, and then I'm going to talk about what actions can be taken as a result. And what that kind of leads to is kind of this classical argumentative structure that that Roman and Greek kind of philosophy was a little bit kind of intertwined over the years. The Romans took from the Greeks and all that. But anyway, so this original Greek kind of way of thinking, which fed Roman argumentative structure as well, was you would grab your reader's attention, try to establish some kind of common ground, but that's not overly necessary in a lot of times, and then your thesis should be somewhere in that, and then you're going to provide your evidence, right? Then you're going to go through like a lawyer would in court, provide your evidence, and then at the end you're going to come back and summarize your argument. And so that's kind of a very kind of simple way of presenting your argument and your evidence, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I'm going to give you a couple of different examples of how you can structure it. One's going to be very close, one's going to be a little bit different. In total, I mean, these are all basically the same thing. You're presenting some information. Hopefully you're going to concede your point, the opposing view to some degree, and then kind of try to come to some kind of resolution or try to find some answer to how you can best come to an agreement. So one of these ways that we can do that is a Tolman argument. So there's a guy named Tolman who was a philosopher, and he kind of came up with this argumentative structure. It's pretty simple. It's something you're going to recognize. It's a little more complicated, so I don't really get too in-depth into it. If you want to get in-depth into it, it becomes philosophy gets very technical, and the way arguments are set up so that they can either be knocked down or try to make them bulletproof a little bit. So it gets very technical. Anyway, what you want to do, present your claim, of course, provide your reasons and evidence. You can see this is very close to kind of that Greek structure, the older Greek structure. But what we really want to focus on is start to acknowledge the other opposing view, right? So some of your assumptions and some of the counter arguments. What are some of the things that you just assume that are going to be the case? So you want to say out up front, I assume that global warming is caused by cars. Well, vehicle emissions. Well, that may well be the case. However, maybe somebody else can bring some evidence in that's going to say that actually, in fact, which I'm pretty sure is the case, is that the majority, that a huge portion, if not the majority of it, is created by of global warming, greenhouse gases is caused by animal agriculture, right? So that's a problem. So if you are willing to present that other side of that information, the other side of the argument here, and say, well, they're my argument is vehicle emissions. However, there could be other reasons why. So you're starting to open yourself up to a little bit of compromise, which is good. What you want to do then, of course, in the Tolman structure is restate your argument. When we're going to get into this, there's a lot of very specific language that Tolman uses, like claims, warrants, backing and rebuttal, and all the qualifiers and all this stuff. Just understand that his argumentative structure is technical, but what we're it's kind of in that classical Greek structure of how we're going to do that. Now, let me talk a little bit about Rogerian arguments. So there was a philosopher, psychologist, psychotherapist by the name of Carl Rogers, pretty famous guy. His whole deal was thinking about compromise, right? Trying to be human about the way that you engage other people. He's just kind of like he seemed like just a good guy, right? Anyway, so his argumentative structure was a little bit, what we might think is a little bit backwards to most argumentative structures. Well, when we're going to go into our argument, what we want to do is really just kind of present ourselves and say, this is, be the American, right? The ugly American, and say, this is what it is, and this is why you should do what I say, because this is why, and I have the evidence to prove it, and so there, right? So that's kind of the ugly American approach to way we want to make an argument. But Carl Rogers was saying, hey, wait a minute, let's kind of back into this and try to find a way to compromise, because I don't know if you've been around, more than, an hour or two in your life, but you know that you're not going to get your way, right? Which you might be able to get a little bit of your way. You might be able to get 50-50. It's never, a clean break, but you're never going to get everything you want. And the other people, other folks that you're dealing with aren't ever going to get everything that they want either. And so that's kind of the approach that Carl Rogers took to his argumentative structure, was to say, let's find a way to compromise, because that's really the only way we're going to get anywhere, right? If we just keep arguing at each other, if we're just going to be Fox News and MSNBC yelling at each other and telling everybody why I'm right and you're wrong, we're going to get, where does that lead us to? It leads us to right now, where we have this incredible polarization in our country, because nobody's willing to compromise and just say, hey, I see your point, and your point is valid, and I got it, because, you're from the South, and you like guns, and you like whatever you want to do, I got that, I understand that. And, or, if there was a little bit more, Southern person saying, hey, I see you're from the city and you have a different perspective and different lifestyle, and that's okay, and I don't have a problem with that. Just, don't infringe on my rights, and I'm not going to infringe on yours. That trying to find that kind of common ground might be helpful, which is, I think, was what Carl Rogers was trying to say. So his structure is really simple, right? So what you want to do is identify the problem, right? Because what we're trying to do is kind of come to some resolution of a problem. So you want to identify your problem. Your thesis is going to be in here somewhere. You're going to, introduce the ideas, tell them why it's a problem, start to present some of your information perhaps. And then what is going to be different for the way that we have probably traditionally thought about arguments is we're going to just jump straight into the opposing view, right? We're not even going to consider our point yet. We're going to say, hey, look, I see where you're coming from. This is one way that people think about this idea. This is one side of this argument, and this side of this position of this problem that we have. And then what you want to do is validate that, and you can bring in some evidence to say, yeah, they're absolutely right. Cars do cause a lot of, cars are a huge part of global warming concerns. It's a huge problem, I got it. And then after you've done that, after you validated the other side and said, hey, they have a really good point, and be honest and be sincere about it, right? Maybe you don't consider all their points to be valid, but some of them have to be, right? This is part of that compromise. Some of those positions have to be right. Then you're going to get into your position to say, I got it. They think that, a lot of people believe that vehicles are responsible for all the global warming. But I'm going to tell you, I think in my position, what I've found, what the evidence shows, at least to me, is that a large part of it is animal agriculture, right? There's going to be a huge portion of it because animal agriculture is wrapped up in all kinds of things, animal waste and the transportation, and causes vehicle emissions, and fertilizers that go into the ground are created by petroleum industry and all this other stuff. So now we're going to start to validate our position. And then when we get to the end of this Rogerian structure, what we want to do is to say, these are the benefits of my position. You're not necessarily going to knock the other person. You're not going to say why they're wrong here, but you're going to say, hey, this is my position, and I think this is why you should consider mine. And I know you have your position too, and that's fine, but this is what I want you to at least consider when I'm the position that I'm taking. And if you see this, it becomes, you start to think about finding compromise, which is really what we want to do. All right, so think about maybe about structuring your papers in that way. If you can, it actually strengthens your argument inordinately to be able to show the other side that you have taken them into consideration, and you do, where you can, believe that their positions are valid, because their positions may well be valid. There's no problem with that. Anyway, so all right, enough Carl Rogers. All right, so let's think a little bit about logical fallacies. These are things that I want you to try to avoid the best you can with your arguments. So here's some here begging the question. This is kind of a simple one. Everyone wants a new iPhone because it's the coolest, right? Well, that's not a good reason why. I mean, these new iPhones are what, like $1,200 or something like that. That's an insane amount of money for a stupid little pocket computer. That's not a great argument. Now, if there's a better argument you come up with, that's fine, but that's just begging the question. That's just silly. Either or arguments, this is fine. If you can't have it, nobody is going to, if I can't have my way, then I'm going to break the toys and go home. That's just, that's kind of a silly, very selfish, childish way of approaching an argument. You don't want to do that. Ad hominem attacks. Ad hominem in Latin means, basically to the person. And so what you'll see online, what happens, ad hominem attacks are when you attack the person and not the issue. This happens a lot when, oftentimes when the person who is making the ad hominem attack runs out of a valid position, when they're back themselves into a corner and they have nothing else to say but, oh yeah, but you're fat, right? That's an ad hominem attack, because you've relinquished all of your ability to present information in a way that makes sense, or to try to find some kind of a compromise. Stay away from ad hominem attacks the best you can in every aspect of your life. All right, we know bandwagoning too. That's easy. If everybody's going to jump off the bridge, wouldn't you? No. All right, so slippery slope arguments. These are ones we don't want to make either. So the real simple one that is in our culture, or has been up until the past maybe 10 years or so, about legalization and decriminalization of marijuana was, well, yeah, but if we let everybody smoke weed, then everybody's going to be a crackhead the next day, and that I don't think the evidence shows that. Straw man arguments are ones where you kind of put somebody up just to beat them down, right? That's kind of the idea of a straw man. If one person believes in this idea, then they're going to be a terrible person all the way around. That's not the case. Hasty generalizations, that's a long word. This is a simple one too. Just because of one thing, I had one bad experience at going to shop at Lowe's or whatever, that doesn't mean that every experience you're ever going to have there is going to be terrible. Maybe you just had a bad day, or customer service people had a bad day. I don't know, who knows what it is. Anyway, I didn't learn anything in this English class, so ECU's a terrible school. That's not the case. Maybe you just had a terrible instructor, like me. All right, so at the end of the day, what I really want you to take away from building arguments or making argumentative developing your argumentative structural ability is to consider the other person, because until you do that, your argument is just going to be, a 3-year-old throwing a fit. I want my way. I have to have my way. And nobody is going to benefit from that kind of short-sightedness, that inability to compromise, the inability to think past yourself. As soon as you do that, your argument is automatically going to become 1,000 times stronger. That's not a scientific calculation by any stretch, but let's just go that with 1,000. All right, so 1,000 times stronger, because what you're showing the other side is I see you, I value you, I take your position, I understand that you have your position because that's how you grew up, right? Because a lot of times if we say, the position that you're taking is stupid because of this, what you're not saying that their position is stupid. What you're saying is that everything that has happened in that person's life up until that point, everything that has made them, their parents, their community, their church, their schools, everything has turned them into a person that is stupid, is what you're saying. So we don't want to ever do that. We don't ever want to tell another person that, their argument is that they are bad because their argument is bad, right? That's just, it doesn't work. You're always going to lose. Your argument is always going to come out. And so I would, I'd argue that, maybe try some of these structures, these argumentative structures in your own life, outside of writing this paper, is to think, how can I build a bridge instead of, and get at least some of my way, instead of trying to just smash somebody in the face until I get everything that I want, because that's never going to happen. Anyway, so if you guys have any questions about these argumentative structures or the ways that they work, and you need help with structuring your paper, you know where I am. Take care.